In the dusty frontier town of Abilene, Kansas, where entertainment was scarce and curiosity ran deep, a traveling circus promised wonders that would challenge everything the locals thought they knew about human nature. Among the acts was someone billed as the most extraordinary woman in the world, a lady whose unusual appearance had made her both famous and isolated from normal society. What began as a cowboy's casual visit to satisfy curiosity became something far more profound when the person behind the spectacle revealed a heart and mind that transcended physical appearance. Sometimes the most beautiful souls are hidden behind the faces society finds hardest to accept, and sometimes it takes a stranger's kindness to remind someone of their own worth. This is the incredible true story of how a simple act of human decency broke through years of loneliness and proved that real love sees beyond the surface to the person beneath. If you believe that true beauty comes from within, hit that like button right now. Subscribe and ring that notification bell, because stories like this remind us that everyone deserves to be seen for who they really are. Drop a comment about a time when someone looked past appearances to see the real you. I read every single one. The year was 1881, and the arrival of Professor Martinez's traveling circus of wonders brought the first real excitement Abilene, Kansas had seen since the cattle drives ended for the season. Colorful posters appeared on every building, promising exotic animals, death-defying acrobats, and human curiosities that would astound even the most worldly visitors to their spectacular exhibition. Jake Harrison had been working cattle ranches in Kansas for 5 years, saving every spare dollar toward buying his own spread near the Colorado border. At 28, he was known throughout the territory as a reliable hand who kept to himself, minded his own business, and treated everyone with the same quiet respect, regardless of their station or circumstances. The circus set up on the empty lot behind Miller's hardware store, transforming the dusty space into a wonderland of striped tents, exotic smells, and sounds that promised adventure beyond the daily routine of frontier life. Jake watched the setup from the saloon porch, nursing a beer while observing the organized chaos of performers and workers creating magic from nothing. Professor Martinez himself proved to be a dignified Mexican gentleman who spoke perfect English and carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to dealing with both royalty and common folk. He personally greeted prominent townspeople, assuring them that his show contained nothing offensive to moral sensibilities, while promising entertainment that would expand their understanding of the world's infinite variety. The main tent could accommodate nearly 200 spectators, and opening night brought families, cowboys, merchants, and curious visitors from neighboring towns who had traveled miles to witness wonders they had only read about in newspapers and dime novels. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation as people settled onto wooden benches, waiting for the show to begin. Professor Martinez opened with a speech about the marvels his circus contained, emphasizing that every performer was a human being, deserving of respect and admiration for their unique gifts rather than ridicule for their differences. His words carried weight with the audience, establishing a tone of dignity that elevated the show above common sideshows and freak displays. The acrobats performed first, followed by a knife thrower whose precision drew gasps from the crowd, then a strongman who lifted weights that seemed impossible for any human to manage. Each act built excitement while demonstrating the extraordinary capabilities that existed within seemingly ordinary people who had developed their natural gifts through dedication and practice. As the main show concluded, Professor Martinez announced the final attraction, what he called the human curiosities, housed in a separate tent for those brave enough to witness nature's most unusual creations. His respectful tone emphasized the humanity of these individuals, while acknowledging the natural curiosity their appearances would inspire in visitors. Jake felt drawn to the curiosity's tent, despite his usual reluctance to gawk at others' misfortunes or unusual circumstances. Something about Professor Martinez's dignified presentation suggested that this would be educational rather than exploitative, an opportunity to expand his understanding of human diversity rather than simply satisfy morbid curiosity about people different from himself. The Curiosities tent contained several individual booths, each featuring a person with some unusual physical characteristic that made them noteworthy to paying customers. A man with no arms who could write and draw with his feet. A woman who stood barely 3 feet tall but possessed the voice of an opera singer, and others whose differences had become their livelihood. The final booth, set slightly apart from the others, bore a simple sign reading, "Madame Valentina, the bearded lady of Barcelona." Jake approached with the same respectful curiosity he had shown the other performers, expecting to see someone whose unusual appearance had led to a career in the entertainment industry, but hoping to treat her with the dignity Professor Martinez had requested. Behind the curtain sat a woman of perhaps 25 years, dressed in an elegant gown that would not have been out of place in the finest parlors of Kansas City or Denver. Her posture and bearing suggested education and refinement, while her dark eyes held intelligence and sensitivity that immediately commanded respect rather than mere curiosity about her physical appearance. Madame Valentina possessed a full, well-groomed beard that reached nearly to her waist, combined with feminine features of striking beauty that created a unique appearance both startling and somehow noble. She spoke in cultured English with a slight Spanish accent, greeting visitors with dignity that transformed their curiosity into something approaching reverence for her grace under circumstances that would have broken lesser spirits. "Good evening, sir," she said to Jake with a voice like music, her manner suggesting someone accustomed to social interaction with people of quality rather than the rough frontier audiences she typically encountered. "I hope you find our small exhibition educational as well as entertaining. Professor Martinez believes that understanding human diversity makes us all more compassionate toward our fellow beings." The conversation that followed surprised both Jake and Madame Valentina with its depth and naturalness, as they discovered shared interests in literature, music, and philosophy that transcended the artificial barrier created by her unusual appearance. Jake found himself genuinely enjoying their exchange, forgetting entirely about the circumstances that had brought them together in this tent. Recognizing her extraordinary intelligence and sensitivity beneath society's superficial judgments. As other visitors moved on to examine different attractions, Jake remained engaged in conversation with Madame Valentina, learning that her real name was Elena Vasquez, and that she had been educated in a convent school before circumstances forced her to seek employment with traveling shows. Her intelligence and sensitivity impressed him far more than her unusual appearance, making him see her as a person rather than a curiosity. Elena's request came quietly as Jake prepared to leave the Curiosities tent, her voice carrying vulnerability that contrasted sharply with the professional composure she had maintained throughout the evening's exhibition. "Mr. Harrison, would you perhaps consider staying for a cup of coffee? I have a small pot brewing in my private quarters, and I so rarely have the opportunity for genuine conversation with someone of intelligence and kindness." Jake accepted without hesitation, recognizing both the courage Elena had shown in making such a request and his own desire to continue their conversation beyond the artificial boundaries of performer and paying customer. He followed her through a curtained entrance to living quarters that revealed far more about her true character than the exhibition booth had allowed. Elena's private space was arranged with the care and taste of someone who valued beauty and comfort despite the limitations of traveling show life. Books filled makeshift shelves, sheet music was neatly stacked on a small table beside a guitar, and personal photographs suggested a family history that extended far beyond her current circumstances as a circus performer. The coffee proved excellent, prepared with obvious skill and served in delicate china cups that spoke of refinement maintained despite the rough conditions of constant travel. Elena moved about her small domain with grace and efficiency, creating an atmosphere of civilized hospitality that made Jake feel welcomed as an honored guest rather than a paying customer extending his visit. Their conversation resumed naturally as Elena shared her background, describing her childhood in a wealthy Mexican family whose fortune had been lost during political upheavals that forced them to flee to the United States. Her unusual condition had made normal employment impossible, leading eventually to Professor Martinez's respectful offer of work that allowed her to support herself while maintaining her dignity. Jake found himself sharing details of his own life that he rarely discussed with anyone, telling Elena about his dreams of owning ranch land, his loneliness in a profession that kept him constantly moving, and his growing desire to find someone who could see past his rough exterior to the man beneath. Their mutual honesty created intimacy that surprised both of them with its depth and naturalness. Elena's intelligence became increasingly apparent as their discussion ranged across literature, current events, and philosophical questions that revealed the quality of her education and the depth of her thinking. Jake realized that he had never met a woman whose mind challenged and stimulated his own intellectual curiosity so completely, making him forget entirely about the physical differences that had initially drawn his attention. The photographs Elena showed him documented a family history of distinction and accomplishment, with ancestors who had been scholars, artists, and professionals before political chaos destroyed their social position. Her condition had appeared in previous generations, she explained, though most affected family members had lived in seclusion rather than finding ways to support themselves through public exhibition. Elena's musical abilities became evident when Jake admired her guitar, and she offered to play something for his entertainment. Her voice proved as beautiful as her speaking manner, performing Spanish ballads with emotional depth that brought tears to Jake's eyes and made him understand that he was experiencing something far beyond ordinary entertainment or casual social interaction. The evening deepened into night as their conversation continued, touching on dreams, disappointments, hopes for the future, and the loneliness that both had experienced in their different ways. Jake began to see Elena not as a curiosity or even as an unusual woman, but simply as a person whose company he enjoyed more than anyone he had ever met. Elena's vulnerability emerged gradually as she described the isolation of her life with the circus, explaining that while Professor Martinez treated his performers with respect and dignity, the constant travel and exhibition made normal relationships impossible. She had resigned herself to permanent loneliness, finding solace in books and music, while accepting that she would never experience the companionship most people took for granted. Jake's own loneliness resonated with Elena's, creating a bond between two people who had both learned to find satisfaction in solitary pursuits, while secretly longing for genuine human connection. Their conversation became increasingly personal, as they recognized in each other the understanding and acceptance they had never found elsewhere, despite the vast differences in their circumstances and backgrounds. The late hour eventually forced acknowledgement that their time together was ending, though neither wanted to return to the loneliness that had characterized their lives before this unexpected encounter. Eleanor walked Jake to the tent entrance, her manner suggesting someone saying goodbye to possibilities she had never dared imagine might exist for someone in her circumstances. Elena's final words carried both gratitude for Jake's kindness and resignation about the impossibility of their continuing what had begun as simple curiosity, but had evolved into something approaching genuine affection. "Thank you for seeing me as a person tonight," she said quietly. "I will treasure the memory of our conversation and your kindness for the rest of my life." Jake spent a sleepless night wrestling with emotions and possibilities he had never confronted before, replaying every moment of his conversation with Elena while trying to reconcile his growing feelings with the practical realities of their different worlds. The memory of her intelligence, her grace, and the loneliness he had recognized in her eyes made returning to his normal routine seem impossible. The circus was scheduled to depart Abilene after 2 more performances, a deadline that added urgency to Jake's decision-making process. He could either accept that their meeting had been a pleasant but temporary diversion, or find the courage to explore whether their connection might develop into something more substantial, despite the social obstacles they would inevitably face. The second night's performance drew Jake back to the circus despite his uncertainty about whether seeing Elena again would help clarify his feelings or make his decision more difficult. He told himself he was simply ensuring that their conversation had been as meaningful as he remembered, though his heart knew he was seeking confirmation that their connection had been genuine rather than wishful thinking. Elena's professional demeanor during the evening's exhibition masked any recognition of Jake's presence among the curiosity seekers, though he detected subtle acknowledgement in her glances that suggested she was as aware of him as he was of her. Their previous evening's conversation had created a bond that transcended the artificial performer-audience relationship, making pretense of ignorance impossible for either of them. After the crowd dispersed, Jake approached Elena's booth with the same respectful manner he had shown previously, though both recognized that his return indicated something beyond casual interest in her unusual appearance. The tension between them reflected their mutual awareness that his presence represented a choice point that could determine the direction of both their lives. Elena's invitation to join her for coffee again came with obvious nervousness that revealed her own internal struggle with hope and self-protection. Though she maintained the dignity that had impressed Jake so deeply during their first encounter, she led him to her quarters with movements that betrayed her awareness of the significance this second meeting held for both of them. Their conversation resumed with the same natural flow that had characterized their previous evening together, though both recognized that Jake's return indicated deeper interest than simple friendship or intellectual curiosity. Elena shared more personal details about her life with the circus, describing both the protection Professor Martinez provided and the essential loneliness of constant exhibition to strangers. Jake found himself speaking more honestly about his own desires for a different kind of life, describing his dream of settling down with someone who could share his vision of building something permanent and meaningful together. His words carried obvious implications about his growing feelings for Elena, though he struggled to express them directly, given the uncertainty of her receptiveness. Elena's response revealed her own longing for the kind of normal life that her condition had made seem impossible, though she spoke with the resigned acceptance of someone who had learned not to hope for things beyond her reach. Her honesty about her limitations and fears created intimacy that deepened their connection while highlighting the obstacles they would face. The question of their future together arose more directly as Jake found the courage to express his growing conviction that their compatibility transcended physical differences and social barriers. He spoke of his willingness to face whatever challenges their relationship might create, though Eleanor's skepticism reflected her realistic understanding of the prejudice they would encounter. Elena's tears came as Jake described his vision of a life together where her intelligence and sensitivity would be valued more than her unusual appearance, though she struggled to believe that such acceptance could exist outside the protected environment of Professor Martinez's respectful circus. Her emotional response revealed how deeply she longed for the normal relationships her condition had denied her. Jake's proposal that Elena leave the circus and marry him shocked her with its directness and sincerity, though she protested that he couldn't possibly understand the social consequences of such a decision. Her list of practical objections reflected both her desire to protect him from association with her and her fear of hoping for something that might prove to be temporary kindness rather than genuine love. Elena's admission that she had fallen in love with Jake, despite her efforts to remain realistic about their prospects, created a moment of mutual vulnerability that transformed their relationship from possibility to commitment. Neither could deny the depth of their feelings, though both recognized the challenges they would face in building a life together. Professor Martinez's unexpected appearance at Elena's quarters interrupted their emotional declaration, though his respectful manner and obvious concern for her welfare made clear that he had been aware of their developing relationship. His presence added authority and dignity to their situation, while providing an opportunity to discuss practical arrangements for Elena's departure from the circus. The circus owner's blessing on their relationship surprised both Jake and Elena, as Professor Martinez revealed his own observations about their compatibility and his belief that Elena deserved the chance for normal happiness that Jake was offering. His support provided validation that gave Elena courage to accept Jake's proposal despite her remaining fears about their future. The arrangements for Elena's departure from the circus proceeded quickly as Professor Martinez helped coordinate her transition from performer to rancher's wife, providing both practical assistance and emotional support that made the change possible. His generosity and understanding demonstrated the respect and affection he felt for Elena as both performer and person throughout their years working together. Elena's final performance with the circus took on special meaning as she said goodbye to the life that had provided both security and limitation, preparing to embrace an uncertain but hopeful future with Jake. Her courage in leaving everything familiar for love impressed even the other performers, who recognized the magnitude of her decision and the depth of trust she was placing in Jake's promise. The journey to Jake's ranch in Colorado Territory marked Elena's first venture into the world beyond traveling shows, and her nervousness about facing society as Jake's wife was balanced by excitement about the possibility of creating a normal home life. Jake's steady reassurance and obvious devotion helped calm her fears while reinforcing his commitment to their unconventional partnership. Their wedding took place in the small church of Pueblo, Colorado, with only a few witnesses present who had been carefully chosen by Jake for their open-mindedness and discretion. The ceremony itself was simple, but deeply meaningful. As both Jake and Elena understood, they were embarking on a journey that would require courage, patience, and unwavering commitment to each other. The ranch that became Elena's new home was modest but well-maintained, situated in a valley where the nearest neighbors lived several miles away. The isolation that had once represented loneliness to Jake now provided privacy that allowed Elena to adjust to married life without the constant scrutiny she had endured as a circus performer. Elena's transformation from public curiosity to rancher's wife required learning new skills and adapting to routines completely different from circus life. But her intelligence and determination made the transition smoother than either she or Jake had anticipated. Her organizational abilities and attention to detail soon improved the ranch's efficiency while creating a comfortable home environment. The couple's first visitors were Jake's closest friends, who had been prepared for Elena's unusual appearance, but were still surprised by her education, refinement, and obvious devotion to Jake. Their acceptance provided validation that helped Elena gain confidence in her ability to function normally in frontier society, despite the physical differences that marked her as unusual. Elena's musical talents found new expression as she provided entertainment for community gatherings, her beautiful voice and guitar skills earning respect and admiration that helped overcome initial prejudice about her appearance. Her contributions to local events demonstrated that her value to the community extended far beyond her relationship with Jake. The challenges Elena and Jake faced as a couple included dealing with occasional hostility from narrow-minded individuals, but these incidents were offset by the growing number of people who came to appreciate Elena's character and contributions to their community. Their marriage proved that love could indeed transcend physical differences when supported by genuine compatibility and mutual respect. Elena's pregnancy, 2 years after their marriage, brought both joy and anxiety, as she worried about whether their child might inherit her condition, while Jake focused on his excitement about becoming a father. Their shared anticipation strengthened their bond, while highlighting their commitment to creating a loving family, regardless of any challenges they might face. The birth of their son, healthy and normal in appearance, represented triumph over Elena's fears and validation of their decision to build a life together. Little Miguel became the pride of both parents and a symbol of hope that their love could create new possibilities for future generations. Elena's role as a mother revealed new depths of her character while providing her with the sense of normalcy she had always craved, as caring for Miguel gave her the same experiences enjoyed by women throughout their community. Her natural maternal instincts, combined with her intelligence, made her an exceptional parent who raised their son with both love and wisdom. The success of Jake and Elena's marriage became an inspiration to their community, demonstrating that true partnership could overcome any obstacle when based on genuine love and mutual respect. Their story challenged conventional notions about appearance and worth while proving that happiness came from character rather than conformity to social expectations. Years later, as Elena watched Miguel play in the ranch yard while Jake worked with the cattle, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from circus exhibition to contented wife and mother. The love that had begun when a kind cowboy chose to see her as a person rather than a curiosity had transformed both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. The legacy of Jake and Elena's love story extended beyond their own happiness to influence their community's understanding of human worth and the power of acceptance to transform lives. Their marriage proved that genuine connection transcended all barriers, and that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories began with the simple act of looking past appearances to see the person beneath.